Okay, we are going to get into the history of the origins of the company with their grandfather, Riley Wampler. So tell me what you know about the beginning of the company.
I'm going to take part of this. They lived down toward Cave Creek, down this direction, and he dropped out of school in the third grade to help work on the farm. And so his education was of a third grade as far as his formal education was. But when he was grown and he wanted to marry, who at that time was Edith Phillips, our grandmother, the Phillips wouldn't have approved of him. And so she worked at the mill, the cotton mill in Lenore City, and she wore a dress, and her grandparents, her mother died when she was a baby, so she was raised by her grandparents. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Why are you wearing a dress today?" And she said, "They had me working in the office." But actually she was going to elope. And my grandpa borrowed a truck from a man that owned a grocery store in Harriman, and he took that borrowed truck and went and picked her up at the mill, and they eloped.
How old were they?
She was probably 17 or so, maybe.
I don't know.
We can find that out, but yeah, they eloped. Now, I'm having a senior moment. What they did that day, I think they went to maybe a peach farm or something and picked peaches or something. It wasn't a traditional honeymoon.
Yeah.
We'd have to ask Ruth Ann.
I don't know.
We'd have to ask Ruth Ann what. But Mr. Gooch was the man that owned the store. They borrowed the truck from. Just came to his name. But when he passed, when Grandpa passed, they said, "We remember some of the workers down here, Jim Wampler and Roy Morney and different Homer Hall, different ones." They said when one of the additions was done down here, our grandfather wrote a note and buried it on the foundation. And so they got down and they busted out cinder blocks and reached down in and struggled around, and finally one of them came up, and it was a little glass tube about that long, and it was sealed with wax on each end. Mm-hmm. And they brought it up here and broke it open on a tree right outside this house right here, got down at the trunk of the tree and broke it open. And believe it or not, that was 1974, and this note was written in January of '61, and it was still legible. We have the note. And
Where is that?
I have it.
Okay.
I'm not letting you see it. But he starts out, it's January of 1961, and he says, "This building was built by," and he names 2 or 3 of the workers and says, "and a helper or 2. Then he goes into having the sweetest wife and describes a little bit about her, and he says an honorable son, and then a sweet daughter-in-law, and talks a little bit about mom. And then he names Ruth Ann and something about her, and Mary Lee and something about her, and he names Teddy, and he says, who likes to imitate one of the rascals on TV and maybe pretend him with a pop gun or something. And I had only been around a few months, because this was January '61. I was born in October of '60. And so the only thing he really say about me, he said, "and John Edd with that sweet smelling neck that a baby has." But then he says,
What happened to that?
Yeah. Then he says, at the beginning of this letter, you may have thought I was going to write a lot about the building, but I'm thinking of one not made by hand. I'm a country boy, but I'm going to a city whose builder and maker is God. Mm-hmm. That's what's on his headstone.
Is that
Yeah.
Now, tell me what you know about. I was reading somewhere where he started the company before your father graduated high school. He was going from door to door selling.
Right, yeah. That's correct. Our grandmother made the sausage in the kitchen of their farm home, and they sold it door to door. And when Dad graduated high school in 1947, they each put in $1,100
No.
and started the company. And
Okay.
Dad earned his money
picking blackberries.
picking blackberries and selling fishing worms and fish bait and things like that. You know, he said he didn't do good in school because while he was sitting in class, he was always thinking where he could go somewhere and try and make a nickel or something.
Yeah.
You know, and
Now
so
they closed the company a little while during World War II.
during
correct?
Korea, the Korean conflict, I believe.
right.
Yeah. And so that's when Dad was in the military, was during the Korean conflict. And so when he came back from that is when it reopened.
Oh, okay.
And so it's originally it's this little building down here on the parking lot. That was Wampler's slaughterhouse.
The total material cost for the first building was $38. And Dad always insisted that we keep it intact. It's still down there. And partly, going back to Bojangles, he always wanted to emphasize to our employees that if we don't treat the customer right, we'd be able to make all the sausage we can sell back in that building again. But it was also to show when we bring in a potential new customer that we will grow to fill their orders, because we're not still in that $38 building.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, Grandpa, he was more of a land trader and a livestock trader. And so, of course, when they got an animal on hand that he couldn't do well on the trade with, that's when they would slaughter and sell the meat.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we were right down here in this swamp bottom. I believe Grandpa actually bought the farm in 35, and the company originally started in 37
Okay.
on the farm, and he cleared it, you know, down there by hand and with the help of a horse, as we say, out in the blistering Tennessee sun. And then, of course, when people tour today and see all the solar energy panels and all that kind of stuff, we always say, well, you know what he did in the sun, but if he saw what we're doing with the beautiful Tennessee sunshine today, we think he'd be right proud.
Oh, I bet.
People used to ask Dad if he'd ever thought about selling, and he would say the only two things I know how to do is make sausage and pick blackberries. And he would say, I don't want to pick any more blackberries. But the solar took out the blackberry field. So he had, we had to keep making sausage.
Yeah.
When your dad came into the business with his dad, Riley, how did the business change?
The distribution changed going from door to door to store to store.
Okay.
And then now warehouse to warehouse.
Yeah.
That's the distribution changed big time. And then of course
And I think when Dad came in, Grandpa did very little then,
Right.
and Dad actually became the author of the company.
Okay.
And he actually came up with the technique of how we make sausage. You can take your animals and just basically put the meat into as you're harvesting, as you're taking them. You can go into a giant grinder and go reduce, and take that final ground meat into a blender and put your salt and seasoning into that blender. And instead of doing that, like everyone else, we separate the cuts, the lean and the fat in our process.
Okay.
Then we blend those back together, not as the animals come, but by weight. So we make specific lean fat ratios for everybody we pack for. And so we do the first reduction and get our measurements. And then after that, we add seasoning to those big pieces. There's a whole lot of technical reason why I don't know that they knew that at the time, but we don't extract a lot of protein. So then when we grind, after we do our final grinding, we don't blend anymore. And so it gives us Dad came up with that. And so when
Recipe?
Oh yeah,
That
recipe,
that
but also
that
the
process.
technique.
That
And
process
so-
gives us a more tender bite.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that technique, I always tell that we still use Dad's original technique to make product, but today we do it a little faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because now, if you've heard the saying, when pigs fly. Well, if you want to see pigs fly, You know, that's what we do now. I mean, we'll go from a harvested animal to a finished product in about 42 to 55 minutes or so.
And then still use his recipe?
Yes, we still do the recipe. We still use the technique. So we go to all that trouble to separate and blend back. Our people, our teammates down at the plant are phenomenal at what we do. We're the best.
Okay, so as far as the meat is concerned, do they bring the live
Oh yes,
pigs here?
live animals come in. Yeah, we harvest.
Okay, so you harvest.
That's the politically correct term to use today. Is we are a harvester. So yes, the animals come in and
From the Corn Belt
yeah.
states.
Okay.
And then,
Iowa, Nebraska.
yeah, and then from there, yeah, in 45 minutes average, we're in finished product. And so, it's pre-rigor meat. And then we will either liquid chill at -5 degrees, or we'll use liquid nitrogen at -315 degrees to instantly freeze the product.
Wow.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think about those things.
No, it's actually amazing. We have people come and go through our plant and they just can't believe it. But we still use Dad's technique.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, and
that is basically the blending.
yeah, well, the whole thing of when to grind. Of course, like I say, everybody else grinds and blends. We blend and grind more or less, and that could have been because we didn't have all the right equipment. I don't know, but anyway, but that's how it came about. And Dad did figure out that with the difference in the different animals, that you actually needed to separate and go back in, with a set target, things like that.
We mentioned that accounting, Mary Jane, earlier. Dad taught himself accounting with a correspondence course through the mail.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's why we appreciated learning accounting so much, because he emphasized that.
Sure.
He couldn't have run a business without it, and he did it literally with a correspondence course through the mail.
Yeah.
But he had no choice. Failure wasn't an option.
Yeah. Dad would work all day, all night, all day.
He worked 36 hours.
Several times, and then sleep. And Roy Morney did that right there with him. And when Dad would come in from work, sometimes Mom would wake me and John Edd up just so he could see us. He would want to visit with the boys.
So how many employees do y'all have now?
Now, most people say, how many folks work there? And we always answer about half of them. But let's see, about 180.
Okay, so it's
Something
large.
like that. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those are families.
Yeah.
The Marney family is probably 5 generations.
Yeah.
Miss
What
Marney,
family?
Marney, the Marneys.
Okay.
Mr. Marney, I think, might have been the first hire.
Grandpa Morney, yeah.
Grandpa Marney, and then his son Roy was one of the key supervisors.
Started there when he was 17.
many decades.
And Roy stayed there, with an oxygen mask on. After he was retired, he came every day and drug a little bottle around with an oxygen thing on, and so that's the way he was. And then, of course, his children work there, and now nieces, nephews, grandchildren. Yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned Harry Wampler.
He came in 1955.
Okay.
He joined
I was going to ask you what was his role?
He came in here in sales, and Harry.
That was your dad's brother, correct?
No, everybody thinks that.
Yeah.
That Dad and Harry are brothers, and to make things worse, Tim and Chris and Paul called Dad Uncle Ted. Me and John Edd, Ruth Ann Mary Lee all called Harry Uncle Harry.
Yeah.
But they are first cousins.
Okay.
But Dad treated Harry just like a brother,
Right.
and brought him in. I guess gave him ownership in the company, and so they worked together just like brothers.
So what was his role?
He came in here in sales.
Yeah.
And then, as we mentioned, when Dad and Harry went over to Elm Hill at the time, then when Dad came back here, Harry was promoted to manager over there, and then they brought in Gene Rector to be the sales manager. But his primary focus was always sales. He loved to be on the road and out there stirring it up. Harry, back in the day when you called directly on all the stores to make the sale, he would go in, and if the butcher was too busy to see him, he'd apron up and grab a knife, and he could bone out a chicken and all, and he would clear their table for him, and then he'd say, "Now you've got time. Now you've got time to talk."
Yeah, they would say, they'd say something like, "I've got a quarter of beef here that I've got to debone," and he would jump up, and before you would know it, Harry Wampler could have a front quarter boned out, amazing. Little bitty pieces of meat would swing off the knife blade, like when he was deboning a rib cage or something. I've seen him do it, and he's amazing with a knife. Yeah.
You mentioned that at one time he managed the Nashville plant.
Yes. Yeah, that was later on.
Yeah,
he went to Nashville and was actually in charge of Baltz Brothers Packing in Nashville.
So how many plants do y'all have now?
One, thank goodness, just one.
Okay. So you've sold those others out then?
Well, we never did own in the Nashville operation.
Right.
Okay.
And actually, the Wampler family, we were minority shareholders in Elm Hill Meats. The Baltz family out of Nashville owned by far the majority of it. Mm-hmm. I think there's a perception, just like Dad and Harry being brothers, there was a perception that the Wamplers owned it. We were working at it.
I think the Baltz were smarter because they got us to run it for them.
Yeah, we were working there, but not the majority owners.
Okay.
One thing I want to mention when you're talking about being sales and developing the accounts and those kind of things, back in the day, of course, the McDonald family owned the White stores, which were big in the Knoxville, East Tennessee area. And Kaz Walker, of course, was one of the leading grocery chains, and he was sole proprietor. He owned Kaz Walker, the Walker stores, and they tried hard to get in there. And the two things that really helped them get in there is J. Basil Mull and Miss Mull were neighbors to Kaz Walker and Miss Walker. And so Dad and Harry were given the Mulls Wampler sausage, and Miss Mull was going over and swapping it out for whatever Kaz had in his refrigerator. So they were eating Wampler sausage at their home.
Yeah.
And then Kaz would go on TV, in the mornings, and he had it was a live commercial kind of thing, but he had a little newspaper he printed called The Watchdog. Mm-hmm. And so he was flipping through The Watchdog, and they had bought an ad in the Watchdog. And he opened it and saw it, and he said, "Wampler sausage, say neighbor, we don't have it yet, but we're going to."
I remember those cats.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's kind of finish up on as far as the plants are concerned. The Elm Hill compared to here at the main plant. When you said that there was a fire at Elm Hill?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the operations are completely different, but we complement each other.
Y'all, they create here and
no,
process
different.
here?
So we're premium sausage, premium fresh sausage, and everything they do would be cooked product like hot dogs and hams and chili and barbecue, and so fresh product and cooked product.
So one plant would use the cuts. The Family Brands or Elm Hill plant would use the cuts from a market hog. And then what we do mainly would be the sow, which would be the mother to the market hogs.
Okay. So y'all just do sausage here?
Yes.
Mainly, yeah. Yeah, no, we're going to have out of the market hogs we do process that are a very specialized animal, we'll have a premium market hog rib. For example, if you go to Aubrey's here in Lenore City, as a sow harvester, we're by name on the menu. Randy Burleson has us called out. And so it is a world champion barbecue hog, and we're doing something unthinkable. We're grinding that into sausage. but at the other plant, that's where you get bacon. So we're sausage, and that plant would be bacon, ham, hot dogs, bologna. Yeah. Okay. So different, but that allowed us to sell together, which we still do. Both plants still help each other to this day.
Okay.
When we go out and say do a food service or restaurant show, if I'm there and I'm selling sausage and I see an opportunity for a hot dog or something like that, we help each other and they do the same for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Tell me about the solar panels. How in the world did they get started?
Well, we actually had some people at the plant that were interested. It's in getting more sustainable. So it different people started looking into what could we do, and so we had engineers come in and they were meeting with the plant manager and they're sitting there saying, they were explaining to him how solar works. And then we had a guy named Harvey Abulata show up. And Harvey said, I'm not going to waste y'all's time telling you how it works, but I can tell you how it can happen for you financially. And so they said, hey, you need to come over here. So I come over and Harvey explained to us about all the grant programs and what all was available. And so it was a true government incentive program that brought about a private industry that could actually come to grid parity. And so a long time ago, solar was expensive. No one would do it without the incentives, just like the electrical grid. Sure. There was incentives to be able to run power to all the houses in South Dakota that are miles and miles apart. They've got the same energy that you do in New York City, the same access. And so we joined up into all these programs, and our first solar project was 30 kW, 30,000 watts. At that time, the biggest system around here was Oak Ridge, and they had 25,000 watts.
So what year was that? Put again.
Trying to think, that would be maybe in 08, 09, something like that.
Okay.
And so it was on top of the sausage kitchen, and all 3 local news channels came down and did a big story, and the USDA, Rural Energy for America program folks, they helped us, TVA, LCUB, all these people came together. We wound up with that first system basically with a payback in 2 years and 3 months, something like that. We were back whole. So then after that, we thought, well, what more can we do? So we started recycling programs. We went into all of our packaging now is 100% recycled. All of our corrugated is recycled, so we're not cutting down any new trees for all the boxes.
Reduced water usage.
Yeah. We did all kinds of stuff to conserve water, like recycling and like I say, then the packaging.
So is the plant 100%?
No, we're a long way from that still, just because we're a big user.
Yeah.
But in 11 we completed the huge solar project, and so that's a 500,000 watts or 500 kW, and so we commissioned that one in 11. It was again with a lot of help from the USDA. We actually applied for and got the largest Rural Energy for America program grant in the state's history that helped pay for that. And so, again, it wound up being really big. We wound up with, it was about 2.454 million was that project. We applied for a 1603 cash grant in lieu of investment tax credit. So we got $702,000 there. $250,000 from the USDA REAP grant that went straight through us to the solar folks. We wound up with a $1.285 million note, a payment of $12,313.39 a month. If you've got a payment that big, you will remember how much it is. And so the great thing is it was designed to be sustainable in every way. The system over a 12-month bite would generate $165,000, $170,000. So when you look at it in 12-month bites, it's in the black and cash flowing in 12-month bites. And so it was sustainable for the environment and the community, and sustainable financially.
Yeah.
And of course, us generating that much power during peak time helps keep down the power bills and the infrastructure costs for all of our neighbors.
Sure.
And of course, it was during that time when we were doing all that big project that we met Sam Weaver. And so that's what led us into the hydrogen energy business, and that's a direction that we're going in now. And that is going to be the thing that will hopefully let us attain a net zero grid connected operation.
The first guy you were talking,
Harvey,
what was his last name?
Abulata.
You know how to spell that?
ABOULETTA.
Something like that.
Okay, so
We can get it for you.
Yeah.
where was he? What was his?
He was in the solar panel business.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually our first project was not with him. It was with Sustainable Futures with David Bolt.
Okay.
But then after that, we started pretty much working with Harvey on several projects.
His background was, whether he was a CPA or not, his background was financial, not an engineer. And that's why he explained it's not just sustainable as far as renewable energy, it's sustainable financially.
Okay.
And so later on, the Knoxville Zoo came to see us, and they were looking at all the stuff we were doing. And as it turned out, the zoo had gotten a contract to be able to install solar at the zoo, but they had everything they needed but money. And so, of course, the zoo, being a nonprofit, would not be able to depreciate the project, all that stuff. So we joined up and partnered with the zoo. And so we owned the 50,000 watt solar project on top of the elephant house at the Knoxville Zoo. And so, of course, that just became a donation to them. And I think in the World Solar Congress, I think we came in second place. We were entered by somebody, and for a public-private partnership in sustainability. And so the zoo project was really a good thing for us to do. And then Family Brands put in, or Elm Hill put in a solar project after that. And so lots of people came, saw what we had done, and then installed solar projects like we were doing. We could have went around and actually taught class on how to get a solar project up and going. Now today you don't need all that because it has reached grid parity, and gosh, we've got another 100,000 watts on top of the new sow barn right now.
I've got solar in my home.
John Edd put them in at the house. That's right.
And,
So I was going to ask
if I was writing the check to the utility company, there's no way that I would lower my thermostat down to 62 when it's 92 outside. But I don't want to waste that sun energy that's hitting those solar panels, so I super chill the house, and then it doesn't use anything that night.
That's good.
If you look on any meat product, there's a USDA establishment seal, and if you see 9065, it was made here.
Yeah.
So that puts some things in the public eye, even though they may be under non-disclosure. So I think we could say our largest
establishment number is 9065. Yeah.
Yeah.
All throughout this area. As a matter of fact, I think he's the only manufacturer who's ever been the president of the Tennessee Grocers Association. Is that right?
Chairman.
Chairman,
Yep.
chairman,
Yep.
yeah. And so normally it's always a grocer
Should be.
that heads that up, and should be. But John Edd, as a manufacturer, has been the chair of that association.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are your titles now in the company?
Pretty much whatever you have to do.
Do little and do less.
Well, the unofficial titles.
Yeah, everything from the rooter to the tutor.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah, that'd be a good way to put it.
I mean, y'all just produce.
he's the president.
I'm the president, and John Edd's vice president. Yeah.
Okay.
That's probably
mean a whole
because
lot.
I was at that company first, but he's my older younger brother.
Ruth Ann loves it when anybody guesses her to be younger, but it's just because she acts so immature.
Yeah.
But
We won't tell her.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
The company has always been run by your family,
Yes.
Yes.
starting with your grandfather and father, and now you all. So once you all retired, who's next?
Well, we actually the fourth generation. We've got several kids, grandkids of Ted Wampler, that they do other things, but we have expanded our board of directors, and we've included the fourth generation on that board. And so that therefore we're informing them what we're doing. They are learning about the business. It's really unfortunate that none of them had actually come into the business yet before Dad passed. But after he passed, we do have some that are actually in there. They're both my children. Ted the third, or Trey, was working in the automobile industry, and I basically recruited him out of the industry. He was bored because he was making bearings and doing that, going from bearing factory to bearing factory. And I said, if you do choose to come here to Wampler's, I promise you, you won't have a repetitive day ever. Every day is going to be different. You will not be bored. And so Trey there now is here now. He better be down there busy right now while we're doing this. But so Trey came in and really has been a blessing to us. He's a mechanical engineer. He's really, really smart at the stuff he's helped us design. It's really been a blessing. And then the other one who's come in is my daughter, Martha. She was in public relations and marketing, and so that's what she's doing for us now. She actually worked in New York City for Fat Dot, and then the Travel Channel, the Food Channel, did stuff like that. She came back to Knoxville with Aldous and then wound up at Shelton Group. And we recruited her from Shelton Group to come to be ours. And so we've got those two in the next generation, and they're doing good.
Good deal.
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch base on real quickly is when you mentioned solar, the 5-acre solar array over here. We also supply the power to the Child Advocacy Center for the 9th Judicial District. And our parents donated the land for that. It's just at the top of the hill above the meat plant.
We didn't even cover that when you asked about Dad and Mom.
But
I had forgotten all about it.
Yeah.
well, it's
Put that on as one of the questions earlier
when
I was researching.
kind of conversation full circle. You mentioned, of course, Eaton School, and that's also where Mom and Dad went, where we went, and our kids. But when Larry Duff was there, of course, Dad, knowing what it was like for him as a child, he would go to Mr. Duff, and nobody ever knew this, but he'd say, "Tell me some families that maybe they won't have much Christmas." And Dad would buy bicycles and take them to Mr. Duff and make sure that they got to those families.
Right.
He's always tried to do, things like that. And so when Chris Evans Longmire was looking for some matching funds, they had somebody that had promised a matching amount, but they needed to raise some, and we met with them, and Dad just asked, they were looking to build a new facility. And Dad said, "Do you think that donor would count land as a contribution?" Because they didn't have a location yet. And so she said yes. And we went from that lunch and went up here and picked out the prime building spot where he would like to put a home.
Dad gave it away, right? With me sitting there at lunch at Aubrey's restaurant, he gave my building site away. And me sitting there, and I'm looking around thinking, well, what the heck,
And so he and Mom donated that land, and they counted that as matching funds. And then, of course, having spent many years in different avenues of politics and stuff, they also put in the deed that if the 9th Judicial District ever stopped using it to benefit children through those services, that they had to sell it and donate the money to the Loudoun County Education Foundation. And if it was no longer in existence, they had to give it to the Loudoun County school system. So it probably will be for a while. And of course, Dad would go up and visit with them, and he referred to them as his girls up on the hill. But he would go up and see them pretty regular. And my wife has done some volunteer work there, but I think Sherry is on the board.
She is. She is vice chair now, and she's going to be chairman of the board. My wife, Sherry Wampler, will be chairman of the board there this next round. And so, yeah, we did help them, of course, in that way. And then today, or not today, it's ongoing today, back in time when we put in the solar system and then the hydrogen system, we went back to the USDA's bucket, which will be a nonprofit bucket, with them and help them get a grant. And that is to run from our power transmitters or power transformers. There's an underground line that goes from our facility up there, and so all of their utilities are on us. So they're on our island of energy, and the great partnership. USDA put in, I think, about $7,500 of that cost. We finished the rest of the capital cost, and LCUB had people volunteer to do the labor to run that line up there. Some wonderful folks at LCUB. They've been good to us through everything we've done in energy, and so so now their electric bill, rides on our island.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of stuff, of course, fundraising, for them, and a lot of stuff going on all the time. Like we have a charity shoot, sporting clays to raise money for the CAC.
Last question. Tell me the most influential person that you've had in your life. It can be more than one.
Dad.
Yeah, it'd be Dad. Yeah, Ted Sr. would be the most influential person in both of our lives, definitely.
How did he influence you? Just
by the way he lived his life, by his actions. I'm kind of the black sheep of the family. John Edd should have been Ted Sr.
I was wondering if I was going to have to tell that.
John Edd should actually be Ted Jr. instead of me, because he's more like him. But yeah, Dad would definitely be the biggest influence in my life. And then
your family sees how you are not in public, and he was the same. And one funny thing, he served on a lot of different things we talked about. You'll not find a picture of him smiling in a picture where he's on county commission or school board or anything else. He said he didn't ever want somebody to see him smiling in a picture where he was spending taxpayer money. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank y'all for spending time with me.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
This was great.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it.
Thank you much.
Yeah.